Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nadia Hussein, and I'm the vice chair of the RAS Global Surgery Work Group. Unfortunately, our chair, Phil Sue, is stuck in the OR tonight, so he's not able to make it. I wanted to take a quick moment just to welcome you to the webinar and introduce our group to those of you who aren't familiar with it. Our Global Surgery Work Group is made up of resident and associate members of the ACS with an interest in global surgery across a whole range of surgical specialties. In addition to hosting webinars like these, we try to connect our members to opportunities relevant to global surgery and also facilitate collaborations between members through things like works in progress meetings where people can discuss their ongoing work and get ideas and input from others. Our meetings are open to all RAS members, so please feel free to join us if you have any interest. We meet the second Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And now I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Basant Abdulrahman, who is the RAS liaison for ophthalmic surgery and a senior resident in ophthalmology from the Eye World Hospital in Egypt, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Professor Sherif Emil, MD, CM, FACS, FRCSC, FAAP, is the current International Chief Medical Officer for Mercy Ships. Dr. Emil is based in Montreal, Canada, where he is a professor of pediatric surgery at the McGill University and a pediatric surgeon at the Montreal Children's Hospital of the McGill University Health Center. Dr. Emil is the Mirella and Lino Saputo Foundation Chair in Pediatric Surgical Education and Patient and Family-Centered Care in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, McGill University. He is also the Associate Chair for Education. Mercy Ships is an international charity-based non-governmental organization that operates a fleet of hospital ships, providing surgical care and free healthcare services in more than 70 countries. Dr. Emil published several landmark papers and several book chapters. He calls patient-centered care the bookend of medicine, where medicine starts and ends. And we're very happy to have you here today with us, Dr. Sherif Emil. Thank you for having the time.
Thank you, Basant. I have to let the audience know that it's 3 in the morning for you. So I'm really humbled that you not just joined, but agreed to introduce me. Thank you so much. It's also particularly sweet to be introduced by somebody who shares my heritage, and we probably lived very close together at some point. And I just want to thank Nadia and Anusha and Phil. Phil could not be with us, but he's worked very hard also to arrange this, and also Brad. And finally, Dr. Sutherland from Member Services, who facilitated the rescheduling of the seminar. So it's really my pleasure to be with you. I feel very privileged. I love spending time with young surgeons and trainees. That's my passion. And let me just bring up my presentation, and we will get going. And hopefully there will be plenty of time for others to provide their input as we go through this next hour. So I just want to start with some disclosures. As Basant said, I have worked with Mercy Ships since 2018 as the pediatric surgery specialty consultant. This is a volunteer position, but I was appointed International Chief Medical Officer on January 1st, and that is a compensated position. I will be talking about some of the efforts we're making in Mercy Ships towards what we call equity in global health. And I also want to make an important disclosure that this is not meant to be an academic talk, although I will quote some literature. This is really, just as the title says, about my journey and sharing my experiences with you all. So this is really a very personal talk with a lot of personal perspectives and opinions. And those perspectives and opinions do not necessarily reflect those of the American College, Mercy Ships, or any of the organizations that I am affiliated with here in Montreal. So what would I like to accomplish in this hour we have together? Well, I would like us to discuss, because I really hope that this will be a discussion, some practical methods to translate good global surgery intentions into good global surgery practices. The overwhelming majority of intentions we have as people who practice internationally are good, but sometimes our practices do not match that. So I hope to share my experience with you, what I've learned, and how I feel we can maybe continue to bring good practices to global surgery. What is global surgery? Well, there's several definitions, but a definition I like is a multidisciplinary enterprise seeking to provide improved and equitable surgical care to the world's population based around the central pillars of need, access, and quality. I assume that a lot of people on the call today are from North America, and I think it's important to stress that global surgery really starts at home. Because when we talk about the words equitable, when we talk about need, when we talk about access, when we talk about quality, these are not just things that Africa needs. These are things that our own nations still need despite our advanced healthcare. So I hope we keep that perspective as we continue tonight. Now, here is the dilemma that has been talked about and spoken about and written about quite a bit. There's a significant interest in global surgery, and I'll show you some data in a minute. And we know that there's a massive need for surgery. Without quoting, the millions of operations that have to be done. I mean, we've all seen the statistics, and we don't need to revisit that. But the interest is very strong, and the need is very strong. And the dilemma is, how do we align the interest and the need so that they can actually have a common goal? Again, I'm not going to go through a ton of literature, but I think we've all visited and revisited the issues that have come up. This is an interesting short paper that was published in World Journal of Surgery 15 years ago. And even though it's labeled as original scientific report and review, it's neither a scientific report nor a review. It's actually a short paper published by 4 military surgeons who had done a lot of volunteer work and were sharing the lessons they learned. And they talked about the 7 sins of humanitarian medicine. And, they're all listed here. The last one is probably the most difficult one, doing the right thing for the wrong reason, or even more commonly, doing the wrong thing for the right reason. And I've seen, many examples of that. So these are the issues we're talking about. How do we, as surgeons who are residing and practicing in high-income country, engage our colleagues in a positive way so that we're doing the right things for the right reasons? And the other question that has been posed, and it's a very reasonable question, is global surgery really global? Global surgery has really kind of originated in the West, so it has a Western epistemology. The geographies of the North and South are very unequal. There is lots of examples of unequal participation. There's examples of the desire to bring resources, but in fact ending up extracting resources instead from places that are already resource limited. And then a significant concern has been an asymmetry in the power and control of global surgery projects. Now, where did my journey start? Well, my journey actually started very, very early. On the left here is a picture with my Nigerian and Indian friends when I was a few years old. My parents had moved. They were both physicians, and they moved to a very small state in Nigeria called Kwara State. And I grew up there for an early part of my life. And in retrospect, became clear to me as time went on, and that's actually where my journey started. It didn't start with medical school. It didn't start with residency. It didn't start with starting my practice. So it's been a long time, and I had an amazing opportunity last year to go back to the town where I did grow up. And this is actually a picture with children who are now the age where I was when I was there. And I went back to visit my school and talk to the children in classes where I learned. And it really allowed me to reflect in a very genuine way on this journey that I've been on for quite some time. Why was I in Nigeria? Where we went to Nigeria to administer the TRIC course and work with our Nigerian colleagues. And I will just start with that because it's the latest example of what I believe is a positive way to bring change. So we all know that pediatric trauma is a huge problem. It accounts for 35% of the childhood disease burden worldwide. It is the primary cause of mortality in children older than 1 year, collectively outpaces all other causes of mortality in children, and it claims the lives of 1 million children globally each year. What may not be obvious is that 95% of those deaths occur in low and middle income countries where there really are still no trauma systems to speak about. So the toll in LMICs of pediatric trauma is quite massive, and yet the amount of pediatric trauma education is really low. So the TRIC course is something that was started here in Canada by the Royal College in 2012. It stands for Trauma Resuscitation in Kids. And now it's being provided by the Canadian Association of Emergency Physicians. And essentially, it's like an ATLS for kids. It's a 2-day, very simulation-centric course. And in many pediatric trauma centers in Canada, it's replaced ATLS, and it's even diffusing through the US at a very rapid pace. But until very recently, it had only been given once outside North America. That was in Brazil, thanks to a fellow, a pediatric surgeon who was doing a research fellowship with us, Dr. Fabio Botelho, who was able to take the course and deliver it in Brazil outside North America for the first time. So we applied for a Royal College grant. This is a program they have every 2 years called IDAC, or International Development and Collaboration Grants. And our grant objective was to adapt the course to Brazilian and African needs and create a national and regional cadre of instructors who will then propagate the course in their countries and regions. And we called our grant Democratizing the Trick, really trying to make the trick available to people who normally would not take it. The tuition for the trick in North America is around $2,300. It's not an inexpensive course, and obviously, very, very few, if any, surgeons in LMICs who are going to pay this much to take a course. So we designed our grant with a roadmap that had 3 phases. The first phase was to actually conduct the course and identify champions within our colleagues in Africa who would then want to propagate the course by becoming instructors in phase 2, and then they develop and present the course to their colleagues with a single US or Canadian trick faculty member acting as a helper or mentor. And from the get-go, before we even applied for the grant, before we filed anything, we sought partnerships. And we really thought to link our interested faculty in Canada and the US from some major universities, in addition to the Canadian Association of Emergency Physicians, with societies in Brazil and Africa that have credibility and that would endorse what we're doing and actually come along our team and come beside us and work together to make this happen. And we did this at a very, very early phase. And in fact, if it wasn't going to be possible, I was not even going to apply for the grant. So we did that, and we were able to get the grant. I'm showing the amounts in Canadian dollars because they look a lot more impressive. I don't want to show them in US dollars, but it was still a significant amount of funding. And we decided to take the course to Brazil and then to West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. So this has been about 1 year and 3 months now that we're on this journey. We've completed phase 1 in Brazil. Phase 1 was also completed in Nigeria last September. That's what took me back to Ilorin, where the course was held. And it was preceding the annual meeting of the Association of Pediatric Surgeons of Nigeria. We did this on purpose because in talking to our colleagues, we did not want people to have to bear additional costs to travel or to have additional hotel costs for coming to the course. So our strategy from the beginning was to attach it to national meetings in the countries where we're going to do it. We just finished the course in Kenya a couple of weeks ago. I just got back on Sunday, and we will be going to Burundi in November along with COSEXA to repeat the experience. So the way we prepared for it, within a month of getting the grant, we had the first introductory meeting. I was in Sierra Leone on the Global Mercy, working there for a month, and we hosted the West African College of Surgeons, who were going to be our partners in creating the course in Nigeria. And then after that initial face-to-face introduction, we had regular Zoom meetings between course faculty, our Nigerian host, and representatives of the organizations. We created a WhatsApp group for urgent notifications, and that came in very, very handy because at the last moment, we were not able to enter Nigeria because of some visa difficulties, and our friends really on a Saturday mobilized everything possible to let us in. So it was really like a very important part of what we ended up doing. And everything about our decisions regarding the course logistics, the contents, the attendance, everything about the course was made jointly by Nigerian and North American partners. Nothing was made without their input. And then once we finished the course, we created a committee of 2 Nigerian surgeons and 2 North American surgeons to choose the faculty who will then conduct the course and continue it. And we had a really stellar experience because of this partnership last September. I'm sure you've seen this African proverb many times, but it really came to life in Ilorin in September of last year. It was very clear that we could not have done this on our own, coming from North America. And it was very clear that our Nigerian colleagues could not have done this on their own. And the only thing that made this a success is our really carefully planned partnership. This is Dr. Jidifor Ogu. He's the Secretary General of the Association of Pediatric Surgeons of Nigeria. And I'm going to play a minute of what he said following the conclusion of the course, because I think that will really demonstrate the success of this model more than anything I can say.
On behalf of the National Executive Committee, the members of Association of Pediatric Surgeons of Nigeria, to profoundly and most sincerely register our appreciation and gratitude to you, Professor Sherif Emil. I remember when Professor Ahmed sent me a message. There are people you don't take their messages for granted, because once the messages come, it's something for the good of both you yourself and those who are surrounding you. And he asked me, can Abson accept to host a mount the tree course? That there's a proposal. By then, the proposal hadn't gone out. And that was before our annual general meeting of last year. And I told him that it's something I was going to relate to the National Executive Committee, but that he should be rest assured that we're going to grab it with both hands. I also remember that in the last Abson AGM in Lagos, it was brought to the AGM and we discussed about it, and Abson unanimously accepted to host the tree course. And here we are, we have held the tree course in Nigeria. Can we put our hands together?
So, that moment was a very special moment, because to see the Nigerian surgeons so proud of having been able to put the first strict course in Africa really spoke more than anything I could have described. And then we took that experience in Nigeria and we brought it to Kenya a few months later, and we again just had a very, very successful course in Kenya in a very different model. We didn't have a simulation center, we didn't have a university, so we had to do the course in a hotel. And so it took a lot of creativity, a lot of adaptation. We had to bring a lot of the equipment from other hospitals in Kenya. One of the highlights that really just brought a lot of pleasure to my heart was that one of our faculty members was Dr. Tina Siolajidi. You see her here in the right upper picture. Tina is a prominent pediatric surgeon. You probably have seen her work. She's a rising star in global surgery, incredibly bright, incredibly gifted technically, clinically, and academically. And for Tina to become a faculty member out of her experience in Nigeria and then bring her experience to another African country really was the proof of the pudding that this is a model that works. So we are now proceeding into phase 2. We've actually completed phase 2 in Nigeria. We have a very transparent application process where anyone who took the course can apply, and we have a small stipend involved to compensate people for their time, because it is a significant commitment. And like I said, we have a committee composed of surgeons from the host country, as well as US and Canadian course instructors who choose. Now, let's just get back to this interest. We know that the interest in global surgery is incredible. I mean, when we interview people for our pediatric surgery fellowship, it's like maybe 2/3 or 80% have an interest in global surgery. And this has been shown over and over, surveying surgical resident, multiple specialties, et cetera. In our field, when we look at pediatric surgeons, it's really quite amazing. I mean, the overwhelming majority are interested. About half have already done international work, and not just to go and operate, but also to teach and to participate in education. So that interest is very, very strong. And the criticisms that have come often is how to translate that interest into a positive experience for our hosts, because it can be a positive experience sometimes for the people who go, but is it really a positive experience for our hosts? And this is one of my favorite editorials by Dr. Haile Debas, whom I'm really honored to hold a prize named after him here at McGill, because he was also a McGill graduate. And in this editorial, Dr. DeBass, who, as you know, came from East Africa and was obviously one of the most prominent American surgeons of the last several decades, really gave his vision of how this could be a win-win. And it doesn't have to be an adversarial or a negative relationship. So I think if we want to move forward in a positive manner, we need to ask ourselves some questions. Can we create equitable educational opportunities and exchanges? Why is this important? Because when we survey our colleagues in low and middle income countries, the overwhelming need is education. If you look at this as a study we did looking at pediatric surgeons, but it's been duplicated in many, many fields. And if you look at what our colleagues ask for, they don't really ask for technical assistance or taking care of patients, or it's really about education. So professional development, funding scholarships, collaborations for training education, overseas clinical training. That is what they're hungry for. And I've seen this over and over and over in one country after another. So coming here to McGill from the US in late 2008, I had a dream of really meeting this in a way that, again, would be an exchange. So we created the first rotation for a pediatric surgery fellow in Africa. It was in Kijabi Hospital, where I had a colleague, Dr. Pinero, who many of you know, again, a very prominent name in global surgery, who'd been a missionary surgeon there for more than a decade. And we created a rotation for a fellow. And within a few months, we made this an exchange. And this exchange had very specific objectives. And I'm not going to go through all of them there, but basically we planned it so that the exchange targets things that the fellow cannot get in their native program, whether they're coming from Africa to spend time with us in Canada, or whether they're going from Canada to spend time at Kijabi. This is what we really wanted, is that we wanted to be an experience that really complemented their residency. And amazingly, this actually became one of the highlights of our programs. We had so many people applying to our program just because it was so unique. And we evaluated this after 5 exchanges happened, and the experience was quite positive for both our fellows and the African fellows. Many of the fellows who came were not just Kenyan, because many fellows from other African countries also train in Kijabi. The irony was that the American Board of Surgery and the ACHME was not allowing this to happen. And we were able to do it because we're accredited by the Royal College and we have reciprocal accreditation. So we were able to do it. But, there was, when I introduced this to the Residency Association in Pediatric Surgery, I was basically mobbed the day I presented it. And, a lot of things were said that probably wouldn't be said today. But there was this impression that we were engaging in an adventure. And so we wrote this editorial with Dr. Jim O'Neill and Dr. Pinero a few years back, and it really made an impact. People started writing and petitioning, and anyway, it was quite a struggle. Only took 5 years. But in 2022, the ABS and the HHME allowed incorporation of up to 4 weeks of an approved international elective in the pediatric surgery curriculum. And I call this an educational practice change. I'm a big supporter of that, because I think it's not about sending a resident or a fellow to spend a few weeks. It's about creating links between us and programs in Africa that sometimes will last for a career. Many of our fellows who've gone have now continued to work with colleagues in Africa on a year in, year out basis and have a long-term relationship. But I say this because we also, no matter how enthusiastic we are, and I was had an incredible amount of passion about this program, but we still have to listen to our partners when we engage in such partnerships. And we always have to prioritize the African priorities or the low middle income country priorities to really have an equitable exchange. So of course, over COVID for a few years, everything went silent. And then after COVID, a new program director came who was Kenyan, and he did not think that the experience of the African fellows was really the best way to have the exchange. He felt that it would be better for the new graduate to come and spend a couple months with us as a new pediatric surgeon to observe our academic, our clinical practices, and so on. And even though this was difficult for me because I was very enthusiastic about the exchange, we listened to what our colleagues in Kijabi did, and this is how we moved forward. We changed it so that our fellow can still go, and we received their fellow for a 4 to 6 week observership. And actually, Standing right next to me here is Dr. Lino, who may be on the call today, I'm not sure, but she had just finished her training in Kajabi. She came and spent 2 months with us here in Montreal, went to the APSA meeting, the American Pediatric Surgical Association, which was being held in Montreal, and we had an amazing 2 months with her. And these are some of the other fellows, again, Dr. Seyo Lajidi and Dr. Damaris Mbalo, who's a Kenyan with my spouse on the side. I'm a big believer in observerships and hosting surgeons to spend time with us. It's not because there's a lot of criticism or are they really going to learn the things they need. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with creating bonds and relationships. This is Dr. Sam Nagash, whose name you may have also seen, another rising star in global surgery from Ethiopia, young, incredibly gifted pediatric surgeon, and that's him with our fellow Paul Trochet and myself during his observership. Another question we should ask is, how can we help our LMIC colleagues feel valued and appreciated on the international stage? Well, you see a lot of online education right now, but how often do you see LMIC surgeons being invited to be faculty? We often think about our colleagues coming from LMICs as consumers of education, but how often do we think of them as providers of education, as the educators themselves? So I have the privilege of working with the Hendron Project, who some of you may know about. It's really a wonderful platform named after one of the founders of our field, Dr. Hendron, and I've made a point of always inviting faculty from low and middle income countries to act as instructors when we have these programs, so that we're not just talking to them, they're also talking to us. And when we have faculty who have a desire to be academic and a desire to be out there, Dr. Emiliana Leia is an Indonesian pediatric surgeon who was our guest in Ecuador in one of our Pacific Association of Pediatric Surgical meeting. And Emiliana was very excited to participate in an online educational program called CB Clips that I run. So we helped her create her own episodes and present the kind of pathology that we don't see in the West. And then we helped her actually host her colleagues from Thailand and Mexico when we had the program in Indonesia. And so she, as the visitor, became the host and really felt empowered to now act as receiving faculty, not just visiting faculty. We just had the Pan-African Pediatric Surgical Association meeting in Côte d'Ivoire last May. We did something really amazing. Again, through the Hendron Project, we called it African Solutions for African Problems. So we asked people from throughout the continent to present abstracts on how they dealt with their challenges, because we sometimes offer suggestions, but we're not there. We go and we see certain things. They have to live with this every day. And we selected the best abstracts, and we had a session where African surgeons and trainees were presenting their solutions to their problems, and we broadcast that all around the world. And we had 300 people from more than 60 countries attend. And it was really empowering especially for the young people and the trainees there, to see that their surgeons, their professors, their continent being featured as a source of education, not just as a consumer of education. Another question is, how can we reach out to surgeons and LMICs? Well, this is our Pediatric Surgical Bible. It's like the main textbook in pediatric surgery. And you see the price here, even with a discount. No African surgeon is going to pay $350 to buy a book. And we don't think of that when we publish these major, compendiums of knowledge. I'm very excited to be the next editor of this book. And one of my main points before I agreed to sign the contract is we are going to make it affordable for surgeons in Africa and trainees to get this book. And we came up with a design where we're going to do that. So it's not going to be beyond the reach. And yes, let's be honest, people do resort to illegal means of getting these books and pirating books, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to create that as a way out for people who need this knowledge and are not able to get it. And it's ironic because even books that are written for Africa, this is a book in our field that's really written for Africa. You can, again, see the cost. I mean, this is a book that's supposed to be for an African trainee. I don't know if you all know that, but many trainees, I just came back from Kenya, residents in Kenya are considered students. They get no salary whatsoever. So for 5 years, they have to depend on their parents to and take loans and so on, because they're still students as residents. They don't make a penny. So they go through an incredible burden to finally make it to be a consultant. And even then, it's not always easy. This is my pride and joy, a book I took 4 years to write. It's not an edited book. It's a written book in some very, very difficult circumstances that were going on in my life. But throughout the time writing the book, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to get it in the hands of people who are not going to pay the price of the book? So I was able to do two things. I actually took the book and translated it into this online program that I mentioned earlier called CB Clips, or Case-Based Clinical Learning in Pediatric Surgery. And essentially, this book was not about the science so much of pediatric surgery. It was about the practice, what I call wise decision-making, good decision-making. I really translated the book into an online episodes that anybody could access. And the majority of people who accessed this were people from low and middle income countries. And then I started inviting colleagues of mine, like Dr. Peter Masiakos in Boston, who I think is on this call, Mark Levitt and others, to become presenters of CB Clips. And then we started inviting people from low and middle income countries, again, not just to consume CB Clips, but to present CB Clips. So we had surgeons from Brazil and Lebanon and Indonesia present episodes. And then I teamed up with Mark Levitt. Mark, of course, is well known to all of you. He's really the authority in pediatric colorectal surgery in a good part of the world today. And Mark had written a number of smaller books focused on pediatric colorectal surgery. And then he went to his foundation. I went to a foundation that funds my chair. And we asked them, can you help us get this book in the hands of people who will not buy it? So we created a program to send our books completely free of charge to surgeons and trainees in low and middle income countries through a very coordinated application process. And what happened was really, we never imagined it. I mean, we were thinking we just want to get them the knowledge. Well, it really wasn't about that at the end, because, it wasn't about sending a book or a few books. It was about creating a community. And we got to meet surgeons around the world whom we would have never met. And many of these surgeons are in touch with us about difficult cases, about problems. We really created a learning community where I always say we serve and learn together. And that led to new partnerships, surgeons in places that we would have never known about, who then started to join our meetings here in Montreal. This was a lot during COVID and everything was online. So we thought, okay, if we're doing all our academic meetings online, why not open them to people who want to come and join us from different places around the world? So we created all this partnership from the Philippines to Uzbekistan to South Africa, and it really, our learning community started to expand before our eyes. And then we, as we started inviting them and more people started to join us, we thought, well, why don't we actually globalize this? This is our hallmark academic conference at the Montreal Children's. It's called SRP, or Surgery, Radiology, Pathology. It's been going on for 4 decades. One of the best academic meetings at the hospital, still very well attended. And we decided to actually open that to anybody, just globalize it. So once a month, we broadcast that live. And it's very different from all the educational stuff you see online, because it's interactive. It's not some people asking questions or it's actually presenting cases and asking people, how would you deal with that in Ecuador? How would you deal with that in South Africa? Let's understand how we can learn from each other. And the impact was amazing. I mean, this is one of the recent episodes, and I think it speaks for itself. And you see how many people, 200 some, 59 countries, and you look at the number of countries listed here, and you can see that the overwhelming majority of them are people coming from low and middle income countries. So this is a way to really globalize our reach. Another thing that I've been very excited about are visiting scholars in our annual meetings. And visiting scholars, again, it's not about just coming and learning a few presentations at the annual meetings. It's really about relationship building. This is a paper that was written by Dr. Dunya Mughal. Dr. Dunya Mughal was a visitor that I had arranged to come to visit the PAPS meeting. And we created relationships with her. She became a good friend of Dr. Mariam Butler, who was my co-chair of that committee. And Dunya was operating on a child with Meckel's diverticulum when the Taliban took over, and she didn't know how she was going to finish her case. She was worried, and she talks about that in her paper, that they may actually come and arrest her in the middle of the operating room. And she spent 2 months hiding from one place to another. And it was through PAPS and the relationships with PAPS that we're able to get her out. And she's actually now one of our fellows. You see her here on the left with Dr. Emmanuel Ama visiting us from Nigeria a couple years ago, and all our global surgery fellows and our on our clinical fellows. So it's all about relationships. We looked at the CAPS, the Canadian Association of Pediatric Surgeons Visiting Scholars, and we found that in almost all cases, surgeons created relationships with them from the CAPS community, went back and worked with them and helped them with cases and helped them with educational materials and so on. We also created this Jean-Martin Laberge Fellowship that I've been very, very enthusiastic about. It's a fellowship that receives fellows both from North America and from low and middle income countries to create a lot of cross-fertilization of thought and exchange of ideas. And a lot of the people listed here, if you put them on PubMed, you'll see what they're doing. They're really doing amazing work in the field of global health. And finally, how can we create an environment where we can serve and learn together? You know, when we in North America give up a few weeks of our income and go volunteer, it doesn't dent us that much. But it's very difficult for a surgeon who lives on an income month to month to give up their practice and go volunteer. So volunteering is a luxury that a lot of surgeons in low and middle income countries want to participate in but cannot. And this brings me to my work through Mercy Ships that I've been really excited about in the last couple of years, is that we are trying to create a model of mutual mentoring that have always worked with African surgeons in many different countries. And when we bring trainees with us, it does not have to be a competitive process if you plan it right. In fact, in almost all the cases, our trainees merged in very nicely with the local trainees and the local surgeons. And we created a program where we can, again, all work together without any type of competition or conflict. And so service and capacity buildings are not mutually exclusive. Both can be done and both need to be done. Alois Sagna became a really good friend of mine. He was a surgeon from Senegal that I also got to work with when I was in Senegal with Mercy Ships. And again, we created the model of shared decision making and shared training. So really, to democratize service and volunteering, we've introduced this program through Mercy Ships, is that when we go as surgeons coming from the West, nurses, et cetera, we're totally on a volunteer basis. But we created a program where for surgeons coming from Africa to actually cover their travel and lodging expenses, to give them a small stipend to compensate for lost income, and to be paired with expatriate surgeons for knowledge sharing and mutual mentoring. And we have now had surgeons from Brazil, India, Egypt, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Cambodia who are in our surgical pool. And the first surgeons have served already on the ships from Brazil and Nigeria. So I'm going to finish with this. What are the lessons that I would like to emphasize at the end? Well, it's about seeking, listening, including, empowering, and sharing. When we think of global health, and now I'm really speaking to the young people who are still building a career in global surgery and global health and excited about this area, implicate your partners early in whatever you want to do. Whether it's an educational project, a research project, a clinical project, seek the input of partners through the process of implementation, throughout the process of implementation of global surgery projects. Empower them to be providers of surgical education if you're going to be doing educational projects, not just consumers of education. And find ways to see if you can have them volunteer with you, so that it's not just that volunteerism does not have to be an unequal affair. And then share your educational activities. I'm sure all of you in your programs have fantastic meetings and a lot of online stuff. Why not share that with some global partners who can also benefit from them? Now, I reached a milestone in my life recently, and when you reach this milestone, two things, I'll let you guess what the milestone is. But two things happen. One is you start to reflect, you start to think back as much as you think forward. And the other thing is a lot of people think you know more than you actually do. So when they invite you to speak, you have to think, what message do I really have to give? So that leads to a lot of reflection. So the next few slides, I'm going to share with you some very personal reflections. And again, they're meant to be personal. I very much respect people who disagree with me on these reflections, and many do. But I'm just sharing with you my reflections. And I hope that initiates a good discussion. I don't believe identity politics belong in global surgery. We have come up with all these labels, and here in Canada, a country that I love, has been my home for the last 17 years, we've kind of perfected that art. People call themselves, male white settlers, I mean, and I just don't think that that belongs in a place where we really want to create true partnerships. And embodying this is Tom Rossen. Tom Rossen is a Dutch surgeon, the very first surgeon I worked with in Africa in 1999, just after I had finished my residency. Tom had made his home in Kenya. He would travel with the Flying Doctor program to the most remote places and do the most difficult procedures. And he could have been, labeled as all kinds of things, but I reunited with him again in 2023, and he was telling me about everything that has happened over the years. And he kept saying, when we go to this meeting or we have this discussion, us Kenyans do this and us Kenyans do that. And, this guy is white as white can be, but he identifies as a Kenyan. So it's not about the color of our skin or what language we speak. It's really about who we identify with. And I think identity politics and labeling people based on their race or whatever, I don't think that belongs in global surgery, at least not for myself. Our world is extremely divided right now. There's so much violence. There are really unfortunate, sad events happening all around the world that are tearing us apart. And I think the one thing that can unite us is education. We all want to learn. And when I'm doing one of these webinars, our SRP or some other project through the Hindran Project, and I look at the list and I see people coming from countries where they would never speak to each other, they would never visit each other, but they're all there together, learning and participating. That brings joy to my heart. That brings hope to my heart. I put this picture because this is a picture. I was a visiting professor at the Cleveland Clinic in October 2022. And in March 2023, I was at Kenyatta Hospital in Nairobi. Two healthcare environments as different can be, But the one thing is the passion for education, the passion to learn was the same. So I really believe that we all want to learn. Education can bring us together. For the young people who are going to be involved in global surgery, be patient. It can be discouraging to not see dramatic change happen and to see year after year tremendous need. I just came back from Kenya and a little girl I met broke my heart once again. Girl was horribly burnt, no care for a week, and arrived in a small camp next to our church mission. We had to take her an hour away to a hospital. I mean, just something simple that could have been taken care of could have killed this girl. But I've been doing this for a while, and I used to volunteer at a Coptic hospital in Nairobi back in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. We basically used to operate in a garage, and that was the cottage was the hospital. And now the hospital looks like what you see on the right. Amazing, amazing hospital with an ICU, an NICU, a pediatric ICU, 6 operating rooms, hip replacements are being done, laparoscopic surgery is being done. So change does happen, but it does take time. And it all comes down to one patient at a time, one learner at a time. I mean, when people say, okay, you're going to go and how many surgeries are you going to do? Well, it has nothing to do with that. It's the same thing when we're in the US and we're struggling to get people care. I mean, I did this for years and years in my California practice because if the insurance wasn't right or whatever, I can't fix the whole system, but I'm going to try to take care of the patient in front of me. And it's no different when you do this in a global surgical context. And finally, equity. I mean, equity is a word that is used left, right, and center. And, if we practiced a tiny, tiny fraction of equity compared to what we actually talk and write about, our healthcare field would be an entirely different place. So when you talk about equity, think of what that actually means in your practice. How can you make that happen? And finally, this is my final slide on something I'm very passionate about. I hope that I've shown you that I take these issues very seriously in my practice, in the way I practice global surgery, in the way I treat people. But I'm also not a fan of a lot of the vocabulary that has emanated, things like surgical colonialism and adventurism and neo-colonial. I mean, all of these things, they point to important things, but we have to be careful because they are sometimes used to denigrate incredible, incredible efforts that are done. And, let's just be honest. There are thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of patients surviving without disability in Africa today because somebody decided they're going to leave their comfort zone and go and help them. And that's just the truth. And, when we see a patient like this, when this little girl who came to one of our Mercy Ships missions with a massive tumor has been growing over 4 years, we knew it was benign because she looked very well. It had been growing since she was a baby. And it ended up being a huge lipoblastoma that was wrapped around the brachial plexus. And we have to decide, do we operate on this child? Or this little baby with a massive sacrococcygeal teratoma in a tiny mission hospital in the jungles of Togo. We struggle as surgeons. We don't take this lightly. Oh, let's just do it. And there's this notion that people just, they don't care about outcomes. That's not true. I've never seen a surgeon actually have that attitude. Now, there's maybe some out there, but that's not normal. We struggle to make these decisions. And when we make the decisions to operate, we do it very humbly. And that, just needs to be recognized so that we don't use this vocabulary to denigrate services and help that is much needed. So I will stop there. I think I took a lot more than I was supposed to, but we still have some time. I will just end with two of my mom's best, most favorite phrases. One comes from scripture: for whom much has been given, much will be expected. And we who are in fortunate situations, no matter where we are in the world, are truly, truly blessed. I just came back from Kenya, where you may have seen that violence had erupted. And there were some people there who could not get out of their hospital, and their hospitals were empty. You could hear a pin drop because everything had closed down. So the fact that we can live in a safe place and take care of patients safely is really a privilege. And finally, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give, which is Winston Churchill's comment. So thank you again. It was really a privilege to be with you, and I'm more than happy to hear your perspectives. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And I just want to end by thanking, there's a lot of people who helped me on this journey, and I want to recognize them. So I will stop my share, and I'm happy to hear or answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emil. That was an excellent talk. You made a really great point at the start that a lot of people interested in this field come in with good intentions, but it's important to recognize that you need so much more than good intentions to really do this work effectively and equitably. So thank you so much for giving us so many good examples of good practice and in partnerships with our partners in LMIC settings. We do have a few questions. We'll start with one from your friend, Dr. Masiakos, who says, in the spirit of transformative resident learning and teaching, I wonder if interested residents and fellows, some who might be on this webinar, could teach through the CB clips as part of research time.
I would love that, Pete. I mean, I've always invited residents and my own residents to participate and to actually do it. So I'm always open, and I'm happy to help them do it, and I love it. When I have a young resident do it like one of our fellows, Dr. St. Louis, had done a couple of episodes, or somebody coming from another institution like yourselves, I am more than happy to work with them to do that. So invitation is open to anyone on this call or beyond this call who would like to participate in creating this. This is an ongoing program, and I should say that, again, at the Hendron Project, we've now put all their 50 episodes that have been made. They're all in an AI searchable library now on the Hendron Project, so it's actually become a resource. So if any of you are going to be preparing for your oral board exams, that's a nice free resource to use. And each episode is just 2.5 minutes, so it's very digestible.
I will definitely be checking that out after this. And then Dr. Matsiakis had another question. He said, in these times of privation, how will funding cuts, as we've seen directed at the USAID budget, impact this work?
Dramatic and tragic. I was very happy that PEPFAR was spared. You might have heard that PEPFAR was spared. PEPFAR is a big, big program. And when we were in Kenya, we have several clinics in our missions that depend on PEPFAR. And at one point, they had to send everybody home. Thankfully, they hired them all again 3 weeks later, but at least PEPFAR is spared. I don't have an answer to that, Pete. That's going to be a massive challenge. And, to be perfectly honest, there are people in Africa, and I can't name the people, but they have felt that, yes, major revisions needed to be made because the amount of waste has been enormous. We have to admit that. But the problem is you're throwing the baby with the bathwater, and you're destroying entire programs that don't just benefit patients, they also keep people's livelihood going. I mean, there are thousands of people in Africa that work for these programs. That is tragic, and I think we have to continue to advocate, regardless of what the the current situation looks like, and also celebrate the little victories. I think saving PEPFAR is a victory that we need to celebrate.
Our next question is from Mashid Mortazavi. He says, great presentation, Dr. Emil. As we think about expanding volunteerism in global pediatric surgery, do you think the media could play a role in promoting it more broadly? Could we involve institutional communications or even public media to share stories and raise awareness?
Well, Mashid, that's a great question, because actually there was just a piece on Kenyan TV 2 days ago. And because that was one of my presentations to the Kenyan Association of Pediatric Surgeons, encouraging them, letting them know about the volunteer opportunities. And a reporter picked up on that and actually broadcast a piece saying, this is an opportunity available. So yes, media can definitely help. But really, it's not so much about media as it is about relationships, because people also have to trust that what you're presenting to them is something positive. And that's not easy to ask somebody to leave their practice behind and go to a different place. So a lot of it comes after trust and relationships have been established. And that is, I think, stronger than anything anybody can see in the media.
We have a question from Nelly Anj Konshu, who says, thank you for this talk, Dr. Emil. Could you please share how you decided to structure your time abroad at various stages of your career, from the aspect of location, funding, time spent within the bounds of a formal institution versus on your own?
Yeah. I've gone through, Nelly Anj is our next fellow, so I feel like I'm planting all these questions in the audience, but I'm really not. It's been different, Nelly Anj. It depended a bit on the situation that I was in. So when I started my career at University of California, Irvine, I had a really wonderful chairs who felt that it was important to support this work. And I was just doing, I was creating some relationships in Kenya and really concentrating on one country. And I would actually be able to keep my income when I did it, and I would go overseas, and I wasn't spending months, I was spending on the order of weeks, but I was able to keep my income. Then I came here to Montreal, and essentially when we leave, and I'm not just the only one, I have a couple of other partners, we have no income. Our income stops, goes down to zero. So it really becomes a personal investment in what your passion is. But I've been able over the 15 years to raise several $1 million just in donor funding to support our global surgery practices. It was never going to come from the hospital, and a lot of it was not going to come from the university. So it really came from engaging donors in the work. And what does that money do right now? Well, it pays for our exchange program. The funds that come from it, from the investment, pay for the exchange programs, pays for our observerships, because when we invite observers, we cover all of their expenses, 100%. It helps fund our global surgery fellows, our Jean-Martin Laberge fellows. There's a fund for that. So that has been a lot of what has funded our more dynamic programs that we've built. But on a personal basis, it's essentially a personal investment. And it really depends on your work situation. For some of you who may be completing residency and negotiating, there are some surgeons who've really done this well. They've been able to negotiate global surgery contracts, and they may make a bit less than their colleagues, but you need to find a department that believes that that's a priority. So it's a very, very diverse set of situations.
Dr. Abdurrahman has a question about how practicing on a ship is different than a traditional hospital or other settings that you may have practiced in.
Yeah, I mean, I bit into a humongous watermelon because it is very, very difficult. I mean, imagine this. What happens in your operating room when all of a sudden there are like 3, 4 new nurses? Things slow down, they're training, Now imagine an operating room where every Monday morning, a third of that operating room turns over and you have new people coming and people have gone. And you're dealing with crew, surgeons and nurses and other people who are coming from 40 different nations, who come from very different medical cultures. It is a miracle that it actually works. Honestly, one of the hospital directors once told me, Mercy ships only works in real life. It would never work on paper. and it's true. If you wanted to design something like that, it's very different than working in a mission hospital or an NGO hospital on land where you have, more or less the same crew all the time. Maybe somebody comes to visit and help. So we do it because the reason it works is because the people who come, they have a passion for coming. They know what they're getting into, and nobody volunteers once. Almost everybody comes back and back and back. So it presents a tremendous amount of challenges, but it's been going on for 50 years, and it's really proven that it works. And I think our success recently, we just added a new ship, is because we're engaging our African hosts more and more and more. We're doing a lot more on land. We're doing a lot more capacity building. In Senegal, in Guinea, we've created a dental school that we fund 100%. We have ophthalmology programs in Morocco. I mean, we are all over the place now on land. And I think that's the model moving forward. But it's exactly the point I made earlier. I think this conflict between teaching people to fish and providing fish is a false one. There are people dying every day because they're not getting the care. And when those people come our way, we need to provide them the care. We cannot keep saying, oh, we're not going to do that. We're just going to capacity build. So, I have colleagues who refuse to operate in Africa. No, I'm just going to go and teach. Well, with all due respect to them, I don't think that that's the correct approach, because when you see somebody in front of you whom you know is going to perish, and you say, well, I'm not here to do that. I think that's our fundamental mission, is to still heal whoever comes across us.
I have a quick question. So, as I've learned more about the world of global surgery, I've come to understand that it's pretty difficult for partnerships to be really truly equitable when most of the funding is still coming from high-income countries. Do you have any thoughts on what more can be done, both on an individual level of a project or a program versus on a larger scale, that might help address that challenge over time?
Yeah, so it depends on how you use the funding. I mean, I think our trip course was a perfect example. Our partners, basically fund the kind of ancillary things around, meals and things like that around the course. So the understanding from the beginning was, yes, most of the funding and the in-kind funding was huge, because the CAP removed all their fees. All the faculty are going as volunteer. Nobody gets paid a penny to do it. So the point is that try to dissociate the issue of funding from the implementation. And I think maybe it's an elephant that can there's always an elephant in the room, but honestly, it comes back to relationships again. I mean, if you create the right relationships and people trust you with your intentions, then it doesn't come in between you so much. But you have an excellent point. I mean, when you look at a lot of the global surgery papers, I mean, who are the first and senior authors on them? Mostly people coming from the West. So there's a problem with that when you're doing a lot of your work with your hosts, and yet they're not getting as much credit. And it's a lot of it is because the funding is coming. So the onus is on us. The onus is not on our hosts to dissociate that. The onus is on us to say, we're thankful, we have the resources, and we're excited to bring you the resources. But the resources are one thing, and the implementation of the projects is completely a different thing.
That makes a lot of sense. A question, we are a group of a lot of residents and trainees, and so just a kind of a question in terms of like career building is the global surgical work takes a lot of, essentially like academic time. So especially going into like early attending HUD, and also then building out a career, how did you decide how much time to stay clinical at your home institution, and also how to negotiate that with leadership? I understand you eventually have become leadership, but there's a lot of pressure nowadays, especially surgical, to operate because that's what's bringing in revenue. So if you have any words of advice for the trainees.
Right. So a couple of things. I think the first thing is, be honest with your intentions. Be honest with yourself. Examine yourself first and see, what is it, that is my passion. I mean, I think the field of global surgery is actually becoming a well-recognized academic field. I mean, our fellow Paul Trochet has done amazing work during his residency. I mean, already developed incredible expertise. So it's like doing, becoming a colorectal surgeon or becoming an MIS surgeon. I mean, I really believe this is where our field is heading, and more universities are recognizing that. But you're right. I mean, it's all about financing at the end. So if this is a passion of yours, and this is what's happened with some of our graduates who have negotiated global surgery jobs, you may have to accept a lower income if this is something you want to do in return for maybe your university actually investing in getting you a global surgery fellowship or global surgery research people to help you. The other thing is, it's not exclusive to the Department of Surgery. So if you're joining if you're joining a private practice hospital, I don't think there's going to be really an avenue for that. But if you don't want to do global surgery, you don't really have much of a choice. You have to join an academic group. And outside the surgical departments, most of the medical schools and universities now it's become imperative that they have global health departments and global health fields. McGill has a huge McGill global health field. So sometimes your best partners do not have to come from your department. Just have the blessing of your chair and then seek partners and funding outside your department. And then finally, not every department is going to have that as a priority. I mean, not every pediatric surgery department in Canada cares about global surgery. So it's an issue of, can you convince your colleagues that this is something that is important? And it's not just important because we want to seem like helpers, but it's important for our visibility. We also get a lot out of it. It's important for our global citizenship. And, when you look at, you come to Canada and you ask, okay, who's doing global health in pediatric surgery? McGill will be like right at the top because we've been building it for years and years. So those are some of the selling points I think you can bring to negotiating a position if that's where your passion is going to be.
Appreciate those words of wisdom as we look ahead. I know we are right on the hour, so one last question from Passant, if you want to ask that, and then we'll close it out.
Passant should get the final word because it's 4 a.m. now at her time.
Yes, she has been persistent. We appreciate her presence.
Thank you so much. You did mention that in your contract, you want to make books made affordable to in different countries in Africa. How will you be able to do that?
Right. So we will create virtual copies that people can get and use without, a lot of the book cost is actually printing the thing, So we will be creating a virtual program, and we will be diffusing it in a way that it doesn't go to individuals, it goes to institutions, just like we did with the program Mark Levitt and I did. We never sent it to individuals. We sent it to institutions knowing like almost every university in Egypt has my book. And it was never sent to any one person. It was sent to the university, and it sits in the residents' workshops and the residents' work areas to be used over and over again. We're going to do that virtually, though, so that it becomes a constant available virtual resource. And we're looking at some other ways of decreasing the cost also of publication and so on. But that's a promise I made, and it's a agreement I made with the publisher, and we will do it. The other thing, and I'm just take a minute to mention this, the other thing you don't see when you look at our major textbooks is how often do you see within our textbooks tropical diseases or diseases in low middle income countries included on those textbooks? You do not see that. So we are actually going to have an LMIC editor on the book so that every chapter, no matter what the subject is, has a section contributed and focused on the type of diseases that LMIC surgeons see.
Perfect.
Dr. Emil, thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful for your time. This was an incredibly enlightening talk, and I think, it started a lot of conversations that people are always having around how we can bring our best selves to the field and increase access to surgical care. And we really appreciate the work that you've done, hearing from you and you spending some time with us. Nadia and I just want to thank everyone else also that helped put this webinar together. Passant for coming up with this idea and spearheading it. Thank you so much, and for being here at an absurdly early hour. I hope you get some rest in the morning. Brad, for helping with all of the operations of the Zoom and the webinar. Phil, we are thinking about you in whatever case you are doing right now, but so is the life of a surgeon. And thank you to ACS in general for being supportive of making surgical care more equitable across the world. Just a reminder to everybody that if you're a resident or trainee, you are more than welcome to join the Resident Associate Society. Any of the committees, our committee specifically is the Global Surgery Committee, and we meet on the second Saturday at 10 a.m. EST, which kind of helps spread out time zones for folks that are further ahead of the US. And so hopefully everyone is able to attend those meetings. They're free to attend, and you can sign up and stay involved with us through WhatsApp and through emails as well, or any other RAS committee, and just being involved in ACS Hope as well, which I know Brad had posted in the chat about if you're interested in broader efforts in improving surgical access globally and also in rural areas here in the US. So thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully it's a good night for most people, but good morning if it is very early wherever you are. And we look forward to seeing you around at ACS events and future global surgery events as well.